Dr. Jazz.
Great, Matt. Thanks for taking the time that you made
Thank you.
Yeah. I think I've talked to almost everyone who you played with in the last couple of years, almost.
Okay.
Kate is planned Gentile in the summer.
I
so
saw that. I saw that. Yeah, she told me that because we're partners. We're
Oh, really? I
we
didn't
are
know that.
yeah, we're life partners. Yeah, yeah. We live together. So
Oh, wow. Oh, cool. Okay. Yeah. I
yeah,
mean,
yeah.
I'm kind of trying to investigate this entire creative scene that's happening around. So
Yeah, cool. Great.
And since we mentioned Kate, I want to ask you about your latest Oblong Aplomb. If I probably
Oh,
pronounced
Oblong Aplomb. Yeah,
Yes, you're wrong. Yeah. So,
right.
but you know, and the other part with chess, Smith and drums,
Uh-huh.
and you know, what was the idea behind it? I mean, obviously it's two duos, and it's like again the most complex stuff I heard. At least it sounds like it. But you know, how did you decide to do that? This project? I mean, what's the
Well,
story?
that's so. I don't know if you know my are aware of my album called Fiction, which is from about 10 years ago.
No, that one I don't. Oh shit. Okay.
It's my first album on Pi recordings,
Okay.
and
Okay.
it's also a duo with Chess, and we play 15 tunes.
Ah shit, I don't have that one. Okay.
And so this Oblong Aplomb stuff, all 24 pieces are from the same group of pieces as that Fiction stuff.
Ah wow.
It's
Okay.
all mostly music I wrote between like 2010 and like 2012. With a couple pieces I wrote like about 7 years ago, but mostly it's it's just I had a real fertile period of composing, and I wrote more music um than I really had the chance to record.
Okay.
So I kind of so when the time came last year to do another record, I decided rather than write brand new material, I had all this other older music that I wanted to still record that I thought was still good. And so it kind of gives, the feeling of like, if you have a lot of stuff and it's like more than can be on
Yeah.
an album, even if you record like a couple albums a year or whatever, then it's like, for me, it was just about kind of bringing myself up to speed or up to date with my back.
Yeah.
The pile of unrecorded music I had. So these pieces are all they're technically, I guess, etudes. They're basically pieces I did write to be somewhat challenging pianistically speaking.
Yeah.
But they're also kind of compositional etudes. Each of them kind of focus on one or two specific things, and I deliberately kept them short. Like they're all like just a page.
Yeah.
Sometimes they spill over into a page and a half or 2 pages, but and so as I started learning them, around the time I started learning them, the first batch of them, which was about 10 years ago, I was playing in Snake Oil. Like Snake Oil was kind of at the beginning of its period of time. And I'd like use them to like warm up during sound checks and stuff. And so Chess would kind of sort of jokingly just kind of play along without knowing the charts. You just because it kind of sounded good if you just kind of played like sort of generic free jazz next with it.
Yeah.
But then we decided, or he decided, and I agreed that, because it involves a lot of work on everyone's part to learn this music. And so we were like, let's actually like learn these pieces together for real and just play them and then improvise on them and stuff. And so Oblong Aplomb is kind of just the next phase of that project. So I had been playing a bunch of them, the newer ones with Chess off and on throughout the past 10 years. And then I was like, well, I have all these other pieces in the same set. So rather than do like a bunch now and then wait another several years, I was like, you know what, let me just do 12 more. And so, but rather than give Chess another 12, because Kate and I play together so much, and we have so
Sure.
much of the same kind of like preferences in terms of what we like to do and what we like to write and play. I gave 12 of them to Kate, and so that's how this album came together. So we just recorded. I did two days last July with Kate, and then 2 days in August, a couple weeks later with Chess, and that was it.
Oh, beautiful. When you practice together or play with Kate, what do you guys work on? Do you work on stuff together, like rhythmical stuff or whatever? Or?
We have. I mean, these days it's more just centered around the latest batch of pieces that either I or she has. I mean, I play in her group too.
Yeah.
And we just recorded, like in February and March, we recorded. We had the sessions for her next album, which is actually going to be coming out in the fall.
Yeah, she told me that. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So, I mean, we work on rhythms and whatever, but usually in the context of tunes.
Okay.
So, like a tune will have some, you know, a lot of these tunes will have one or other like things that need to be shedded, both individually and with a group. And so yeah, we'll like, you know, we kind of work on the stuff individually, and then we come to, you know, kind of like just normal rehearsals, really. It's just that material's just different. You know? I mean, the process is still kind of like, you know, learn the music yourself, and then like, you know, and then figure out how to play it with other people. I mean, we have spent time, not super recently, but we have spent time just kind of shedding rhythms sort of abstractly together, and with Kim Cass, our bass player friend, who plays a lot of this stuff with us. Yeah. And whose own music also has like a, you know, very much of this similar kind of level of challenges, even if it's very differently applied. Yeah. It's definitely, that's one reason we play with him a lot, is because he kind of just, he shares the same sort of like
aesthetic kind of,
it's very similar interests, even if like, you know, they're all kind of a little different with each of us individually, you know.
Yeah. Where does this love for rhythm come from with you? I mean, when I listen to older compositions, you know, it's so, you know, Phalanx Ambassadors. Man, that's some of the most complex music. I mean, you know, it's
in the context of jazz or whatever, you know, let's just say that
whatever,
as shorthand.
Yeah.
You know, creative improvisational music, the continuum of Black American music, or what have you. I know what you mean. In the context of that, yeah, the stuff is very complex. In the context, if you compare it to like, say, some contemporary classical music, it's I mean, I'm not saying that it's like, I'm not trying to sit here and say, I don't know what you're talking about, it's no big deal. It's definitely, to get a band to play this material is, you know, Phalanx was a bit, no, that's one reason duo is a little easier, because it's just, you just have one other person. If it's just me and one other person, all we have to do is link up, you know. Whereas like, if a quintet kind of playing this stuff, it's like the Phalanx music's kind of like etudes, but for like quintet or whatever, you know. And so I don't know, for me it's just like, I've kind of always been interested in, I was kind of always intrigued by these types of rhythms, like even back when I was like first starting to write music as a very like a young teenager. I didn't really fully, it was like, oh, this is cool, like you could put 5 in the space of 2 or whatever, that kind of thing, you know. And then it was just kind of the process of just figuring out how I felt about this stuff myself. But what I would do, the reason I wrote these little etudes was to like kind of explore some of these ideas, and just to see like, okay, what is it actually, to actually like sit down and have a context, instead of just practicing rhythms abstractly, not in like separate from a piece or whatever. Have a piece that has, okay, it has a couple of these things, and just see how it feels to like play these things, you know?
Yeah.
And so through the process of doing that, I guess what I would say is that it kind of makes you realize like, oh, this is what this sounds like. And in a way, it's like, okay, so this is like an exact version of like, say, how maybe like if you place 5 in the space of something, 2 or 7 in the space of 3 or whatever, and then it's like, yeah, it's sort of like triplets or how, but they kind of like not really because everything's even. So how is that different from kind of just kind of stretching and compressing the time? Because I find that they are different.
Sure.
You know, but again, it depends on context. I mean, if you have like we have some pieces where it's just like one polyrhythm, the right hand is all one polyrhythm, and the or one rhythm, and the bottom is another rhythm, you know, where it's just like all 7 against 8 or whatever. So it's like, well, that's a little different. Then for it to make sense, you kind of have to play both sides exactly, or else it kind of doesn't. What's the point, you know?
Sure.
As opposed to just like having like, you know, a quintuplet at the end of a phrase where you can kind of just fudge it and it'll still kind of sound good.
Exactly.
You know? I don't know, just depending. I mean, there's ways, just, you know, all sorts of ways to approach this are valid. And so I don't know, I guess for me, it's not that I don't like normal gridded playing, you know, like 4s and 3s. I have plenty of that stuff. In fact, every time I bring some of that stuff to a band, I assume it's going to be easier because it's like not a bunch of polyrhythms, and those tunes are often just as hard in their own way.
Okay.
You know, for a band, you know, it's like they're not automatically easier just because it's like, you know, like some, you know, if it's the tempo is a little fast, then like playing up 16th note upbeats is
sure.
To get a band, you know, there's a reason there's whole genres of music kind of based on that.
Sure.
You know, because it's like it's easy because it's, you know. That's why like, you know, funk and R&B is like a literal science. There's it's really like a science to it, because it's just like, well, you know, not, you know what I mean? It's like,
no, what you mean, exactly.
So, but anyway, and it's also, I should also stress, it's not like I'm trying to leave normal stuff behind. It's just more like I'm trying to expand, because after a while you realize, oh, I'm hearing this stuff, you know, even if I can't immediately play exactly what it is. A lot of it is, after a while, you write this way, you learn to play the pieces, and then you write new music, and you're like, all right, well, okay, this rhythm I'm hearing is a little different. What is it? And then you kind of work it out, and it's like, oh, it's actually a little more complex. This is like somehow 11 in the space of 5 or whatever. And then it's like, oh, well, you get better at it, and then your mind kind of expands to fill the space, you know. It's just more the process. It's a process. It's just an ongoing process or a continuum of like being interested in stuff and seeing what I like and what works for me, and then exploring it. And then it soon becomes part of your approach, you know?
Yeah. How do you make yourself comfortable? How do you, I mean, obviously you learn that stuff a lot, but to be comfortable in such a rhythmical environment with those musicians who don't make it easy, in a positive way, I'll put it like that.
Yeah. Well, because that's the thing, is my aesthetic too, as it relates to jazz or whatever, is that of exploring. It's not, it is of taking the material too, and not just playing the material, but like interacting with it, like the process of like playing, goes back to like writing contrafacts on standards changes. That's like an early example of it. Really, literally, it's kind of the same thing in a way. Where it's like, I prefer to kind of, it's not like I don't want to just, I mean, I love fully notated, non-improvisational music also. But when I'm playing with improvisers, I write the music to play with improvisers, and I want the stuff I want it to feel like kind of have that kind of vibrancy to it. So, I give my parts, usually I give the drummer what I'm playing, and I just don't.
Yeah, sure.
I don't chart out my drum parts. Not usually, at least. I would, but I kind of like hearing what a drummer chooses to do.
Yeah, with these guys that you play, I mean, of course, it's that. It would
whether
be
it's Dan or
stupid,
Chess.
almost. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, all those guys have. Sometimes they write parts for themselves. Sometimes drummers write parts for themselves too, because that's just what they're hearing, and in a sense that that could be a smart thing, because it kind of saves a little bit of time. Where it's like, okay, I got this really specific thing I'm hearing, and it helps you it's kind of a way in, for a drummer, for instance. So, but then they're writing it themselves, and so they're already kind of developing a relationship with the thing that you wrote, for instance, or that they wrote. So it's like, it's like a version of like shedding it or whatever. But it's like, it just comes from like, we've been doing this for years, so it just comes from, it's just the basics of the sort of the social process over time are kind of the same as anything. It's like how you get good playing.
Sure.
I would imagine get good playing blues with someone. It's like, just get with some people who are immersed in it and just do it. But yeah, it's like there's an element of like when you're by yourself working on stuff, when you're practicing, of like kind of practicing how to practice it, and there's an element of figuring that out. I'm a believer in, why not? We use metronomes. It's really common to use iPhone metronome apps. I use them. Practice to make MIDI files, MIDI realizations of the stuff, and practice to them. Use Amazing Slowdowner, or whatever. Use Metronomics, all the different polyrhythm apps that's totally legit, man.
Sure.
If you use it properly. I mean, that's the thing. You can misuse a regular old quarter note metronome, misuse, you know what I mean? You can lean on it and not be conscious of it. But so there's nothing like, I mean, I feel like anything that kind of speeds up the process is totally welcomed, because
sure.
Because when it comes time to play it, you either can play it or you can't on some level, and it either works or it doesn't. So having all the tools in the world ain't going to help you, unless you know how to actually deal with it. It's like, really, it's kind of the same kind of shit as it is like as any other sort of thing. It's just like, we might just be kind of, there's a sort of, I guess, the added thing of sort of like a discovery kind of element of like, oh, well, this is what this kind of rhythmic environment sounds with this kind of pitch thing or whatever, and then it's like, for me, the interesting thing is then just, because it opens up a whole new different kind of set of like kind of characters and vibes too. It's like outside of how this kind of just sounds really cool, if you play it like, if you play it for 2-3 gigs in a row, it's like, oh, this tune is like kind of opened up to some whole areas, and that to me is like the most exciting thing. Is it's like, because you can, again, just as the same as like, you listen to like Miles Plug Nickel and just like they're playing If I Were a Bell every night, but it just always, and even if it's like pretty similar from version to version, it's like, oh, well, this just even like set 1 versus set 4 on the same night, and it's like, granted, that was an era where it was possible to just play like all the time, whereas like no one in our field is playing with one band all the time.
Oh man,
maybe the Bad Plus is the closest one, but I mean, even them, it's like they do other gigs, whereas like back, but that's a whole other thing.
That's a different story about the industry and everything. Yeah, but I know what you mean. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh, I mean, the whole thing too is this. It's like you have to find other people who really want to do it, because the amount of work it takes to do. It's like I insist. I love paying people to do to do my music, but even if I pay people well by kind of any sort of reasonable standard, it's still, if you want to be technical about it, it's probably not enough money for the amount of time someone's going to put in on it.
Yeah, sure.
You know what I mean? Like, no matter how gung-ho they are, if they're thorough, I mean, some people are just, can really learn stuff fast, so maybe, but then those people often like, they're the people that everyone asks, to like do stuff, so you kind of have to, it's just, and for me, it's just the principle of just paying someone well for their time.
Yeah.
And, but at the same time, it's like, they have to really want to do it. to the point where they don't mind, you know, you kind of have to have people who are kind of willing to step a little bit beyond the notion of actual value. Am I getting actual money for the value I'm providing? That kind of thing, you know, like a normal capitalism kind of approach doesn't
no, that doesn't work in this case. No.
Yeah, no. So which is fine, but that just means it's going to limit, because it's like, because you can have people who are just super gung ho, but it's like you know, desire alone isn't going to help you learn some complicated music necessarily. You kind of have to have the desire, and you have to have the willingness in terms of time in various ways, and frankly the ability to do it.
The knowledge, yeah, sure.
You know? Yeah, and you know, I'm not against, you know, I'm a believer of in the concept of like, if you write the music, you should at least be in the running for, you should at least be first or second best in your band at playing the music.
Yeah.
Early on, at least.
True.
You know, that's, or at least for me, that's what I strive. No matter how good someone else is, I want, even if I'm not like coming in and being the best at playing my own pieces, but if I want to at least be, I'm at least know that I'm on the path to being that, you know?
Yeah.
Just because it's like, well, then it's hard to ask other people to kind of like bust their ass for something if you don't at least conceptually know how to help them learn it, you know? Because if you don't have that, then you're kind of, again, if everyone agrees, if everyone's on the same page, they're all cool about it, then it's fine. Then it kind of doesn't matter. It's like, you know, like anything, like anything in life, you know, someone from the outside may look at a relationship between two people or three people or a band relationship and not understand the dynamics that go on. But as long as everyone's on the same page, whatever it is, music or whatever, then it's cool. So, but that said, I feel like, you know, I kind of like to be, you just kind of have to be in charge if you're going to be in charge, if you know what I mean.
Yeah,
you know?
Sure. Know all the parts and everything.
Or at least be able to say like, oh yeah, okay, that's not quite right. So like, this is what I'm envisioning. And that definitely, as you know, like when we did Phalanx, I would say that what I just described me, but it was like, you know, it was a learning experience for me because I had never done this level. I kind of always wanted to. I mean, that's the thing. It's like, it took me a long time to get to the point where I was like, I mean, up until like about 10 years ago, I'd always had the difficulty of like, everything I wrote was hard for people to play. And it was like, and it would be a stretch for me to play too, but then I'd give it to someone and we would try to play something and it would just be like complete, you know, and I would just be like paralyzed because it's like, okay, this is like completely new. And I'm not talking anything that's nearly as complex as what has ended up on my records. It's just like, it always is like a thing where like, oh, okay, not only did they not know what to do, I'm going to actually have to, you know.
Yeah.
It's like, it's hard enough for me to learn it myself, let alone like kind of pull someone else along. But so the more that I get into it, the better I get at it, then the better. And I feel like that's a thing I've learned too. It's like, now I'm at a point where it's like, even if I know I've written something way beyond my abilities, which I do sometimes, I know it's going to eventually be something I can play, you know?
Yeah.
And then I know at least how to, then it's time to rehearse. And it's like, if I don't have it fully under control, I can be like, okay, at least this is how we can work on it together, you know, or whatever, you know. Yeah. It's a whole thing. There's a lot. It's not as simple as writing just some crazy shit and then just like, oh, it's cool. That's how you play it. You know? I've had to you know, it's like there's a lot to figure out, you know.
Yeah, you rehearsed a lot, right? I read on Bandcamp for Phalanx. It took like a lot of shedding and checking out the tunes and the music.
And we could have rehearsed way more too. It's just like, again, it's like what can I ask people? What is there even time to do?
Yeah,
you know, because especially pre-pandemic, it's like I make my living playing in other people's bands. So it's like on top of it all, it's like I have to be that guy for other people, you know? So it's like, so that takes up my time, and then everyone else I'm playing with is in high demand too. And that's becoming more so. It's like, you know, Kate's always Kate and I are sort of, you know, it's a very, not even unspoken, it's a spoken agreement where we'll always be available to play each other's music. But it's like people, you know, get busier too.
Sure.
You know, it's like Miles is super busy. Patty's become very busy since the time of Phalanx, and Kim's super in demand, and really anyone else, any of the other people I play with on my other records, it's just always it's the usual thing. Everyone has to, you kind of need to take a bunch of gigs or whatever to kind of just make a living, you know? And so, yeah, we did rehearse a lot, but, you know, there was definitely the feeling of, you know, well, we could rehearse more, but we had rehearsed enough. I mean, I'm definitely happy, you know, super happy with how the album came out.
You know what's scary, that even with those guys that you mentioned, you had to rehearse a lot. That makes me scared, man.
Oh yeah,
it's like that's
like, wow. The thing is, it's like as amazing as they are, it's like, you know, I don't think any of them had really played music with that level of detail and that kind of constant level of like engagement required. You know, even Kim, Miles, you know, like they have music in their rear view mirrors of their own and other people's, where it's like it's been pretty involved. But I think the Phalanx music was like, in retrospect on the Bandcamp, I mildly regret having kind of talked about, oh, this is so complex, but it was just because my thing with,
no, but it's really listenable and groovy. You know, when you put it on.
It's I appreciate you saying that. I agree.
At least for me, you know, I'm also not normal, maybe a normal person in a sense that I really love, you know, polyrhythms and being a musician, but still, it's like, it's really groovy. I mean, I guess
appreciate that. Yeah,
the idea as well.
Well, that's the thing, is I value all of that. You know, I love music that grooves. I mean, that's kind of part of the point for me.
Yeah.
And yeah, you know, for me, it's about finding that kind of, you know, sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's about cultivating a sort of like chaos, you know, or like a kind of instability. You know, that's definitely part of it. But sometimes I just want it to just, I mean, I see myself as kind of fundamentally melodic, if you can believe it. You know, it's like,
okay.
I mean,
yeah.
You will. I mean, even when it gets kind of, I mean, I would say on Phalanx, you know, like phasic haze ramps, that's pretty tonal in a way.
I mean, the lines are beautiful that you play. I mean, and that you write, you know, it's just like,
I mean, it's a lot of it is, for me, is really like, sometimes it's just about like, it's about beautiful melodies. I mean, I feel like the ballad on that album, that's kind of like my updated version of like Wayne Shorter or Pat Metheny or something like that.
Yeah.
Just maybe for little moments, you know, and then it kind of goes to another area. But the complexity is just, what I was going to say is, the complexity is just, all it is just a description of what comes out. It's just what my brain tends towards. It's not like, I'm not like, I mean, I guess there is a side of me that's like, when I see something that's like pretty involved, it's like pretty stimulating and intriguing, no doubt about that. But it isn't like the actual, it's not the reason I do it. It's like, I'm not trying to necessarily set out to like just be complex, you know. It's more just like, this is just what comes out. And it turns out definitely relative to, you know, other music in the jazz arena, I'm you know, it's at that far end of that spectrum, that particular continuum, you know, and it's just the way it is.
Yeah.
You know, but my intent is to have that first of all, my intent is not to always have it be there, you know, but again, it's just what comes out of me, you know.
Yeah, no,
what I guess I come by it honestly, I guess you could say, but at the same time, I also happen to value, like you said, it's like I value things that groove and have, it's about visceral power to me sometimes, or either that or just kind of something lush or gorgeous or whatever that kind of, the stuff that's sort of more is a little less quantifiable,
Yeah,
maybe more based on kind of individual perception or taste,
Yeah, I really want to see the charts one day. Like I bought Ben Munder's book years ago. I've been a fan, of course, and
oh yeah,
so sometimes you get like 34 pages of playing in 17/16, and on guitar he's like playing a 7/0 or something, and then changing internally a pattern of what he's playing. It's like, are you kidding me, man? And it's like every bar is different, and
I know. Yeah.
It's like, damn, people, that's crazy,
Well, when you practice 14 hours a day,
yeah,
like
you got it, yeah,
like he sometimes has done,
yeah,
I guess that's that's the one way you could fill up that time.
exactly. Now it reminds me sometimes, like what you do on piano, like what Ben does on guitar, or even compositionally. I get this because his music is also really groovy, at least for me. It's like it has that.
Yeah, and it's gorgeous too. It's
the melodies. The theosyncs are wow.
And it's just who doesn't want to hear guitar just kind of playing some.
Yeah.
He's got this sort of like this thing where it's like this crazy jazz folk of the future vibe. It's like guitar, kind of strummy guitar, but playing these like post Messiaen harmony or whatever. I mean,
it's crazy,
if you will, or something like that. It's like, I mean, there is an element of that on piano for me where it's like I have to. There have been periods like to learn some of that Phalanx music on piano. Like there's one part of that track 6, Be Irreparable, the second half of that, it's like everything from my part it's basically a 4-part chorale, but each of the notes has its own independent rhythm.
Oh shit.
Notated rhythm, and then so it's like, and then the top 2 voices and the bottom 2 voices are in a changing tempo relationship. So it's like 12 bars of 7 against 6, 7 against 6, and then the 7s are like 7 and then like double times 7 against 6 and double times 6, and then it changes to 7 6 over 7/8, and then it changes to 16ths over triplets, and then it changes to 9 over 5/8 again, with that keeping that sort of like, and it's nothing's repeating. So it's like it took me a year to learn those few pages, because it was like I actually was like I would sit down and be like, like I kind of wrote it. It's like, okay, it makes sense to me as I'm writing it.
Yeah,
and it sounds good, but then I'm playing it, it's like, oh my god. And then because then I have to ask myself the question, okay, is this even worth? And I really will ask myself these questions sometimes. It's like, is this worth the effort? Is it going to even? Am I actually? Despite what some people might think, I actually do ask myself these questions. Like, is this like kind of? Is this just sort of needlessly kind of over the top? But then I would play some of it and it's like, okay, that does sound good. I just want, then it's like, okay, am I making sure that like, am I just saying, oh, well, this doesn't work? Is it just simply because I can't do it?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Like kind of being honest with myself is like, all right, well, am I going to just not play this just because I and I'm, failure is kind of not an option for me. I figure like at least, okay, decide that it doesn't work, but I should learn how to play it first, and then I play it and I'm like, okay, it's working. I'm still not sure. And usually it's almost always those types of pieces that are the ones that kind of people end up reacting to.
Oh, sure, man. Like, yeah, because it's like
probably because it's something. if I'm asking, it's like, I don't know all music, obviously, but I know a lot of music. I've spent a lot of time listening to music, partially because if you're going to try some new stuff, you should at least, some version of what have you, learning the tradition or whatever, just learning music that came before you. So it's like, because there's nothing, to an extent, there's nothing new under the sun, but there's a more to the point, there's a precedent for everything,
Yep.
For what I do, there's absolute specific precedents for everything. But at the same time, it's like, even sometimes I find some stuff that, okay, if I'm reacting with uncertainty to what I'm doing, chances are it's something about it that's maybe a little bit new, Yeah. And that might be why some people respond to that thing, because it's like, oh, well, this is it's novel at first to them,
Yeah.
And then it just becomes, and then for people who are like 17 years old who are hearing it for the first time, they're like, oh, this is just what music is. Whereas like I'm 47 and it's like, I've been busting my ass for like 15 years, or my whole life to get to this point. And that's just the way it is. And then those people who are 17, when over the next 30 years, some of them will develop some stuff that's new. And then the young punk will come up and be able to just play it in a week, something they learned that took them a month or a year to learn, just because they don't know it's hard. They haven't gone through the whole process of learning music and then seeing something that's like this here compared to here for them, whereas like everything's just kind of here for them on the same level, just because it's all new to them, so
true. Yeah,
I forget what my actual point with all this was, but there you go.
And just talking about the composition and all this for what you do. I mean, it's
sure.
To ask you, speaking of kind of complex music, it's like your relationship with Tim Berne, and when I did this talk with Tim, I will not quote him. I don't know exactly what he said, but he was like, you kind of harassed him almost in the beginning for some sheet music or something like that.
Yeah.
What's your story with Tim, actually? How did you guys hook up? And, when was the first time you played? And, I mean, how did you get to know his music in the beginning, initially? I mean...
Well, I just became a fan of his music. I got an album when I was in high school. Well, the first time I ever heard of him was I got the John Zorn Spy versus Spy album where they play the Ornette tunes.
Yeah.
I got that on tape when I was like 12 or 13. No, maybe it had to have been a little later, or whenever, like pretty much right when that album came out.
Yeah, like late 80s, something like that.
Yeah, and so that's where I first became aware of him. Then it was also via an album or a review, like an article in Jazz Is, where I saw a picture of him with Hank and Hank Roberts, Joey Berne, in that band Miniature. And then I got a Miniature album at the local record store when I was like 17 or so. And so, but then through that, through college, I just got into his music, because back then you could just walk into a store and buy a Tim Berne album, even if it wasn't like, like you could get his albums in like kind of regular stores, so I just liked his music. I was a fan of his music. And then, I guess in the late 90s, I wrote, because you could, did I just write him I wrote him a letter. I guess there was he had, when he put out his first Screwgun album, Unwound, the Blood Count box set, I think he had an address in there.
I think so. I think so.
Yeah, because that's what it is. I wrote him a letter, and I offered I wanted to buy a couple scores of his. That's what it was, and I put in my phone number, and then I was at school. I was in grad school, and he called me. He actually called me.
Oh wow!
I left a message on my machine, and so he's just like, just send me $20 or whatever. And then so I did, and he cobbled together these scores, which I still have. And then I kind of didn't really talk to him for like 10 years, because I was like, I totally have never been one of those like follow an artist around like a puppy dog people, you know.
Yeah.
I get why that's a good method, you know, and I don't mind. I've since become that. I've become that the object of that activity for younger musicians, which I don't mind at all. I just never was like, I was never wired to be that kind of person to bug the shit out of an older musician.
Yeah.
Which again, you kind of need to do because especially when, because speaking as an older musician, speaking as someone who is about the age that Tim was, or I think probably older than Tim was back then when I was bugging him. You kind of have to do it because the more involved in your shit you get, it's like it just takes everything you have to be able to just do this.
It's like an obsession, almost. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and just the amount of time it just even in a practical or heavily impractical sense, you kind of just have to spend every waking moment working on it. Whether it's working on how to be good at what you're doing and then working on how to actually like fit it into, say, a society that, and I say this with just sort of a dispassionate way, a society that kind of just doesn't really care if you're doing it or not, you know, in the sense of the US, at least, you know, it's like we kind of have to exist in spite of all sorts, you know, we're kind of existing in the cracks or whatever, you know. Not to open up that as a issue, as a topic, it's a big topic, but so anyway, you kind of need people to, or younger musicians do kind of need to sort of, because it's important to meet younger musicians. Like I said, like I was kind of referring to earlier, the ones who are younger who get what you do and really like it often are going to be uniquely positioned to be able to execute music pretty well because they have a perspective, they have a younger person's perspective, which is like, you know, seriously important, or can be at least seriously valuable in terms of like adding a nice little extra spice to what it is you do. Yeah. And they're just like I said, they kind of don't discriminate between like, well, they're like, oh yeah, this is tough, but like, you know, whatever, I just like it because I've been listening to it, you know, like blah blah blah. So I mean, it's like, but I was never one of those people even though I was like, you know, because at the time he hadn't really played much with piano. This is even before Craig started playing with him. I was like, and I was thinking, I don't want to just go and be like, hey, you want to play a session sometime, you know, and whatever. It's just like, so I just figured it would happen gradually if it did happen, and in the meantime, then I was like, now he is playing with a pianist and he's playing with Craig, and I wonder if I had actually like gone to him, if like, you know, that could have been me or whatever, you know. But I didn't, you know, I didn't trip over it too hard, and then just time went on, blah blah blah, and I ended up actually playing with him in 2008. We ended up doing one of Ralph Alessi's School for Improvisational Music weeks in a summer together, and we had just a rehearsal where it was just he and I. Just we looked at because when you do that, you know, there's always a faculty concert. Everyone brings in a tune. So I was definitely the unknown quantity for him. So he was like, you don't want to come over and you mind coming over and looking over this tune of mine? Because it was one of his tunes, you know, that was like, you know, 6-7 pages long. And it was, you know, his music compared to what I've ended up writing in some respects is not complex, which is not to say it is. It's still more complex than a lot. It's, you know.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Definitely not like, oh, I got it. For me now, it's a little different because I've played, you know.
Yeah.
I don't know, probably over the course of the past. This summer will mark 15 years since we first started playing.
Wow. Yeah.
I've probably at least played, if you count number of different pieces of his that I've had to like check out and play on at least one gig, we're probably close to 100.
Yeah, sure.
If not over 100. So it's like, I know.
You know his aesthetic and language, yeah.
A little bit, yeah. Even if like each individual new iteration's slightly different or whatever. But at the time it was like, oh, I kind of have to I had to kind of shed this a little bit. And so then I went over it and we did it, and we rehearsed for like half an hour. And then I brought in my piece too, which was, I made it short because I didn't want to be the new guy coming in and like, here's this piece that's like 70 pages long or whatever. And so we did it, and then he was like, "Oh, you want to play a gig this fall?" Like that was like at the end of our first pretty short meeting, and so I was like, "Yeah." I was like, "Yeah,
playing it cool, yeah,
you know?
Kind of, yeah, sure, I'll check my schedule."
Yeah, exactly, yeah. I don't know, I have all these other gigs, and did not at the time, and then it just that became so that we played our first gig in like the January after January 2009. This short-lived formation called Adobe Probe.
Oh yeah,
which
shit.
was
yeah.
So the first version of that band was Gerald Cleaver, John Hebert, me, Mary Halverson, Shane Ensley, who I went to school with.
Really? Oh wow.
Okay. Yeah, Chris Speed and Tim.
Wow. That's a lineup.
But then there is an album by that group, but it's from the other concert that band played, which Gerald and John and Mary could not make. So it was Dan Weiss and Mike Formanek and Mark Ducray. Pretty.
Yeah, not really a degradation.
Three pretty
right?
average.
Yeah.
Three pretty average run-of-the-mill musicians.
Sure.
There. So.
Beautiful, yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, so then shortly after that, we started rehearsing with Chess, and Oscar was soon brought in, and then what became Snake Oil was first called Los Totopos, which just means tortilla chips or chips. But then he changed the name to Snake Oil, and then that became his next like full on band.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so that's just kind of how that happened. Yeah.
When did you move to New York, by the way? When was that?
Oh, I was living in Philadelphia from 1999 to 2014 or so.
Oh wow, okay.
Yeah. So like later 2014.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I see like you know the albums I have you on, like after 2015, I think you suddenly became this hugely important part, like on on Dave Douglas's, Miles's, Okazaki's, Steve Coleman. I mean, I can just probably Dan Weiss, of course, Palmbeck, I guess. It's just like you're on everyone's albums suddenly, and
Tim and Hollenbeck were the super early adopters of me on piano. That happened at around the same time. I started playing with Hollenbeck a lot around 2009 also.
Already, awesome. Wow.
Okay. Yeah, and that quickly led to I played at Cornelia Street Cafe with John, and Rez Abbasi was in the audience, and so Rez hired me to sub for Vijay in his group at that time, which led Rudresh was on that, and then Rudresh from that asked me to sub for Craig with Apex, which was his current thing at the time, same with Bunky Green. And then that led to me doing Bird Calls with Rudresh. And then around 2012 recorded a little bit very shortly after that, the Dave thing started, the Dave Quintet. And then throughout that whole time, around that time I had been playing with Anna, who was just a friend of mine.
Yeah.
Who I met separately from those people. And then we did it, but she had studied with Hollenbeck. So she started the trio with Hollenbeck, which now has been together for 10 years.
Yeah, it's a beautiful band, man. Yeah, I love
itself. Yeah, and me too.
Beautiful.
And we're gonna do some more playing this year even. And and then it just kind of everyone and each one of these people It was like did instead of just doing one album, ended up doing multiple albums with all these people and other people too. I joined Mario Pavone's trio in 2014 with me. That was me and Tyshawn. We were like his last kind of regular working band for like the last 7 years of his life. We made like 3 trio albums and then another album where Dave Ballou joined us. So yeah, it did kind of explode for sure. You know, in a way that I would not have predicted. I mean, if you had asked me if I felt like I could have done it before it happened, I would have been like, well, yeah, but I don't see how that's going to happen. You know,
sure.
I would have been like, it's the kind of thing where it's like, it's actually probably a little irresponsible to imagine that it's going to happen the way that it ended up happening for me. You know, it's like, oh, I'll just play with one guy and they'll see me and someone will see me and then that guy will hire me and then someone will, you know. It's like a joke from Family Guy. I'll tell 2 people and he'll tell 2 people and pretty soon that'll be like 10 people, you know.
I love that. Yeah. That's true.
But you know, it is kind of like minus the insane wealth that comes with it. It is kind of like that old kind of classic way of it kind of happened in that way where it's just like, oh, I saw you playing with blah blah blah. You want to, and it just kind of worked. And just also, I should also be very clear that a lot of it was just people behind the scenes just advocating for me in really, really heartfelt kind of nice ways that I've learned later too. Like, you know, the guys at Pi Recordings started to show interest, but I know that was partially because, you know, some of the people on Pi were kind of talking to them on my behalf, and I only kind of realized that later. Like Rajesh and Steve.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah.
Were totally going to bat for me. But that, you know, that happens too. I mean, I know Craig recommended me for some stuff too, and you know, because that's the kind of guy he is, you know. So
no, it makes
it's not simply.
You know, you're a monster. That's, you know, that's why you got that.
I mean,
you know,
there probably was an element of like, well, who the fuck is this guy who just kind of sort of materialized? You know, there's probably an element of like trying to figure out what the hell's going on too.
Yeah,
you know?
Sure. Yeah.
I mean, I know I would have that reaction I do have that reaction for new people sometimes. Like, who's this guy? You know?
Yeah. When was the first time you went to Europe, by the way? With whom was that? Like on a jazz tour? I mean, like
on a tour?
Yeah.
That would have been the first time. Would have been 2006, actually.
Who was that?
That was with this Italian saxophonist, Biagio Coppa.
Oh yeah, Ralph played with him, right? No.
That was with Ralph.
Oh, okay, cool.
We did an album called Anastamosi, and
I think I have that. That's like some crazy music, right?
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, in fact, that's why that's sort of like, so because I did my grad school at Eastman, and Ralph was teaching there then. So that's how that happened. Ralph is probably actually the main kind of gateway to all this. Because I knew him in 1996.
Oh, really?
You know, when he was a student there and I was a grad student. And so, yeah, Ralph had met Biagio, and I guess Biagio had all this sort of, you know, as you just said, you heard, it's pretty involved music.
Yeah.
And so Ralph recommended me. And so I did, and Shane played drums on that. Shane Ensley played drums on that album, and Drew Grass played bass. And so, but then we did the tour, and it was Tom Rainey playing drums on that. So the first tour was Drew and Tom.
Wow.
And me and Ralph, like a week long or whatever.
Yeah.
And then we did another tour with the same music the next year. It was me and Ralph, but it was Chris Lightcap and Mark Ferber. In 2007. So 2006 was the first time. Actually, you know what though? Before that, I used to be playing this sort of like super prog, like this avant prog rock band called Thinking Plague.
Mm-hmm.
A band led by this dude Mike Johnson, who lives in Denver, the Denver Boulder area. He's in Denver.
Okay.
It's this pretty complex rock music, you know, like like the rock version of, you know, like Henry Cow, like
Yeah,
kind of
yeah,
like
okay, yeah.
kind of like more updated at the time, like descended from that.
Okay.
Like very little in the way of diatonic material, diatonic harmony or melody, very little in the way of 4/4, like, you know. And so for a little while I played in that band, and we actually went to Europe
Oh, okay.
in the year in it was either in like late 1999 or early 2000. I was like I was 24.
Wow.
23
Okay.
or 24. So that was actually the first time. But then
Yeah, like for jazz.
in terms of playing jazz or whatever the hell it is I do, it was 2006. Yeah. And then it would be like I went like probably like once a year for a few years, and then that steadily increased.
Yeah.
You know.
I'm just asking because, like, you know, when I think of a year, I don't know, I'll shoot out like 2016 for you. Like, you know, you're playing with Dave Douglas, you're playing with Tim, I get, and you know, your schedule must have been like crazy, right? Like,
it was, yeah. I definitely had some intense periods. Like I think in 2013, that year I did a tour with Tim with Snake Oil, and I had like 2 days in between that and a tour with Dave. So we finished up in Molde at that festival, and then I flew to Helsinki and spent my 38th birthday in Helsinki by myself. And then the next day, went to the airport hotel where the rest of the band was, where the Dave band was going to stay, and then we went to the Pori Festival.
wow.
And then had a whole tour there. You know,
Sorry.
That was like the month of July for me. Basically, I was gone. You know, and so yeah, just, you know, that's nothing. This is nothing. I mean, a lot of music. You know, Thomas Morgan used to go over there for months. You know,
yeah, sure, yeah.
He would do the versions of this, but like with, like, you know, Abercrombie, and then play with Frizzell or whatever. I don't know. You know, like, you know. So this is like, what I'm talking about is like, you know, very, very mid-level compared to like a lot of people. You know,
yeah, but still, like within this creative music that you play, I think that's still, you know, it's a
unique, it's a definitely it's a specific,
yeah,
it's a niche within a niche for me that I occupy, but would gladly, I should say. I'm just saying this to indicate that I do not have a necessarily super inflated, even though I feel good about what I do. I don't have that inflated a sense of like what this occupies, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, you know, definitely it's definitely a very privileged position to be in, you know, I mean, honestly, I would prefer to do more of my own music, but at the same time, I think what kind of enriches my own music is just the fact that I play the music of all these just insane freaks, you know?
yeah. It's
I mean, I do it, and it's like, these are all, it's sort of a crazy sort of assortment of like just geniuses and just, you know, legends or whatever that I get to play with. So it's like, it's definitely a cool thing.
Oh man, yeah.
Again, I wouldn't have ever imagined that this would have, you know, I would have, if I had to guess, I would have guessed maybe something like, you know, not a little bit short of what ended up happening for me. But, you know, now it's just like, now it's just like, whatever. I can just kind of keep going, you know?
Yeah.
Although, I mean, stuff is slowed down. Stuff's a little slower this year.
Yeah. After COVID, I guess things are different a little bit. Yeah. But
last year was very busy, but I think what that was a result of all the last of the 2020 stuff.
It got,
most of that happened last year.
Yeah.
I had several things that were specifically slated for 2020 that ended up happening last year, and a few things slated for 2021 that ended up happening last year. So, so as a result, 2023 so far comparatively is a little lighter. But I've just been using that time to practice.
Sure.
Honestly,
yeah,
which has been great.
Sure. Yeah.
So
Yeah. Speaking of geniuses, I wanted to ask you with your about your connection with Miles Okazaki.
Yeah.
How did you hook up with him? And obviously he plays your music, and then you have to play his music, which is equally mildly
It's got a
challenging. I'll put it like that. But how did you guys hook up? Actually,
I'm pretty sure we must have met through Dan.
Oh, okay.
I met Dan first on when that aforementioned Adobe Pro gig in Philadelphia. Well, actually, he came to Philadelphia before that with a pianist named Carl McGuire.
Oh yeah, sure.
And he was
Floriculture, that project. Yeah, I love that.
He was playing with Bear, yeah, in a group with Bear and Stephanie Griffin on viola and Oscar. And I've told this story before, but I met him at they were playing at a place in West Philadelphia called Gojo, which is a really great Ethiopian restaurant. Part of a cluster of really good Ethiopian restaurants in West Philadelphia. And it was warm, so they were eating out back, and I met him, and I was like, hey, we're gonna play together with Tim in a few months. He's like, oh, right, cool, nice to meet you. Hey, you want some of my sandwich? He just right away offered me some of his sandwich. That was kind of like we instantly just hit it off like within the first 30 seconds. He had a sense, and I did too. And so yeah, we became tight pretty fast. And it must have been at rehearsals for his album 14.
Yeah, that was beautiful.
Because he had that album planned for a while, but Jacob Sachs was playing the piano parts. But he was like, hey, so I have this recording I'm going to do, but Jacob's playing piano, but I have some other stuff that I have other parts I wrote for it. Like, would you mind playing organ? And do you think you could play glockenspiel? Which I'm not a mallets player. I mean, I've messed around with it, whatever, like you do if you have access to vibes or whatever. But I just said to him, well, if you give me a lot of time to practice it, or don't expect much, just understand that I'm not really a mallets player. I could at least try it. And so he involved me in that, which was great. But Miles was the guitarist on that, so I didn't know. So I mean, this was, this is over 10 years ago.
Sure.
A while ago. And so Miles and I became friends. We did a duo gig at Corzo, a place in Park Slope, at one point. Yeah, and then I guess it was after we did a couple gigs, and then we learned we were neighbors. He lives a block from me.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yep. Yeah. So we're literal neighbors. And then I would say it's probably around 2015, 16 that we really kind of started hanging a lot, because then that's when I started getting Phalanx going, which I tapped him for.
Yeah.
And so that necessitated spending a lot of time together, obviously. And then it was shortly after that, I guess he put out the first Trickster album maybe in 2017, which Craig was on. But then soon after that, I guess Craig was just too busy or whatever. I don't know what it was. But then Miles called me to...
The Sky Below. You're on the Sky Below, right? I think that's the first one. Yeah.
Sky Below, and then we did the
Trickster's Dream. Yeah, that's killing.
The live album.
Yeah.
The remotely recorded live album.
Yeah.
And then
Thisness, right? Yeah, which is insanely good. Yeah.
And now there's he just sent in the master for the next Trickster album.
Oh wow.
Which is a live album that we recorded last year.
Well,
that's going to be actually vinyl only and vinyl digital only.
Oh, okay, cool.
Which we recorded at Seeds. So yeah, now it's now it's been a lot, and it's going to continue too. I actually several of the pieces on Oblong Aplomb, the duo album we were just talking about. A few of those I'm actually going to expand to quartet.
Ooh.
with Kate, the stuff on the Kate half of the album, we're going to play with Miles and this vibraphonist Yuhan Su, who is this great vibraphonist who I play in her band, and her album's coming out later this year that we did. So Miles is going to be playing some of that music with me as well.
Okay.
And I'm going to do more Phalanx at some point soon. Well, I don't know about soon, but at some point in the nearish future. I'm just kind of trying to figure out what that's going to be, just because it's like, because that'll, as we talked about, that'll involve like another level of like large scale commitment to something.
I'm scared now.
Me too. I am too. But yeah, so the Miles thing is just now, that's just like a motor that's now in, it's not the inertia, but whatever the other side of the object in motion stays in motion, that object is in motion, for sure.
Yeah, it's beautiful what you have going on musically. It's like, because both of you are like equally crazy, but exploring kind of the same ideas, but still it sounds so different.
Pretty different
so
ways.
Different. Yeah.
And plus I get to play with Tid and Sean and Miles's band, which is just whatever fancy fast car analogy you want, or probably more spaceship.
Yeah, I saw them with Steve Coleman a couple of times, and I was just like, what?
I got to play with that. I got to play with them with Steve for a couple of weeks in Paris a few years ago too.
Oh,
so
really?
That was
wow.
Yeah. I got to do a little brief time with Five Elements, so that was pretty nice.
How was Steve like for you?
Again,
I mean, how important was Steve like for you in your music?
Just as important as everyone else.
Right.
I mean,
did you study his music also? Like,
yeah,
he's really into rhythm as well. And
yeah. I got Black Science.
Oh yeah.
When it was new back in 1992, like in high school, I got Black Science. I think I got it for Christmas one year, and it was like immediately. It's like, oh yeah, this is exactly. It was. I had kind of been imagining that sort of music, but not really. Like, it kind of made sense. Like, oh yeah, chromatic music that kind of has different rhythmic stuff in it of that sort, but it was like insanely kind of groovy and funky too, so yeah, that extremely important. Like when, for me, like among the stuff that I considered, like, me and a few friends of mine who like this similar things, it was like Steve Coleman, Greg Osby, Gary Thomas.
Oh yeah.
That was my shit. And then Tim too, and it was like, okay, then like, so like slightly the Tim side of it also, it's like, so the music on one side that kind of had certain kind of rhythmic and harmonic type things, but then the Tim side of it kind of also had links to more the open improvisation.
Yeah.
So that's the thing. I've always really valued the open improvisation, but also kind of trying to negotiate kind of like a really specific form as well.
Yeah,
both things have really appealed to me.
Yeah, you can hear that. Yeah,
sure.
in your music. Yeah, Phalanx and all that stuff. Yeah, you can hear that.
Sure. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Cool, Matt. Just not to take more of your time. Like, what's on the schedule until the remainder of 2023? I mean, are you coming to Europe, and with whom, or not? Or
my only Europe trip that's for sure right now is I'm going to play a couple gigs with Anna's trio in July.
Okay.
We're going to play in Cologne, and then we're going to play North Sea.
Okay.
I'm playing with Tim tonight. Kate and I are playing a trio gig with Tim tonight at Barbez.
Say hi to Tim.
I will.
Say hi to Tim, please.
Yeah, and so I'm recording quite a bit.
Oh, really?
Anna and I are going to record a duo album in July.
Oh, wow, beautiful.
I'm going to record a duo album with Sarah Serpa in December at the end of the year.
Really? Oh, wow, that would be interesting. Cool.
Yeah, I play in her band Intimate Strangers, which is a series, like a song cycle that she wrote to accompany the writings of this writer Emmanuel Aduma, this Nigerian writer. we recorded it, a few years ago, and we've been we played many gigs of that music. And then we really hit it off, and so that'll happen. We're gonna do some duo stuff, and I'm gonna do a solo album. I'm gonna do 2 solo albums at some point.
Whoa, okay.
Here, an all electronic album, completely electronic album, synths, and I do all that stuff on Ableton also, but I have
I
have a synth collection as well. So
fantastic.
Some of that stuff has made it onto my records. But then I'm gonna do a solo piano album too. Other things that are in the works or planned. I have a newish formation with Sarah Serpa, Anna Weber, Sarah Schoenbeck on bassoon, Marielle Roberts on cello, Joanna Matry on viola, Erica Dicker on violin, and Madison Greenstone on clarinet and contrabass clarinet. Is that everyone?
Wow.
Yeah, it's like 8 people. Like, it's just me and those people. It's like sort of like it's a chamberish kind of thing. Everyone's an improviser, but can read really well. And so I'm gonna write some new music for that. I'm also planning a formation with Kim and Kate and Brandon Seabrook.
Ooh, yeah.
Quartet.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now we're talking.
Brandon and I have played together.
I love Brendan. He's amazing.
Yeah, he's on our album Snark Horse. He's played with us before, so this will be like, I just love his playing so much too, and so it's like I just want to kind of continue that. So that's about it. I mean, as far as with other people,
that's about it. It's like,
yeah. This extends into like the rest of the whole year. Yeah. This is up through December. But yeah, I mean, I always play with Tim a little bit. There's always something like that going on. I'm sure I'm forgetting some basic stuff. Oh, I got a tour with Chess. It'll be a US tour, but a tour with Chess's We All Break group coming up in September.
Fantastic.
I'm gonna record Kim Cass's new record in October.
Oh, okay. Lots of new music.
Whole bunch. Yeah, it adds up. Second half of the year will be pretty busy.
Fantastic, man. Wow, super.
Pretty busy in the old school way for me.
Yeah. Well, looking forward to all this.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah, thank you.
Cool. Man, I'll leave you a nice, what is today? Sunday. And have a nice gig tonight. So,
All right. Thanks a lot.
Enjoy it.